Hello, buddy. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is um, Tuesday, April the 8th. Okay, thought I had muted the tab there, but I guess I didn't. Anyways, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is Tuesday, April the 8th, 2025. Um, we are, of course, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Of course, we're just going to give people a chance to come in here. Hopefully, everybody's having a good week thus far. Um, let's see now. So, minute 42. So, at least another minute here before we get started. So yeah, just basically same old, just getting, keeping up on all the things in each. Yeah. So as let's see. Today when I was watching, of course, saw the Popeye cartoon, I ski, you ski, I ski, love ski, you ski. um, That one was pretty good. Saw a couple of Warner Brothers cartoons. I actually saw Porky Pig's first solo cartoon, first feature solo cartoon, The Blowout, where he basically was trying to earn some more pennies to get himself an ice cream soda. All right, so we have three people in here now, so I guess I'll talk about what's on tap for tonight. So I got a couple articles go over from Bleeding Full, both both comics related. The first one we'll be looking at, of course, is so apparently Allied Entertainment, who had actually bought out Diamond Comic Distributors, now is looking to take Diamond to court. Apparently, um, let's see, over last minute switcheroo. So we'll get into that, and also Mark Wade talks comics, chaos, and confusion, sold souls at WonderCon. So those are the two articles we're going to go over today. And of course, we'll have the wrestling wrap up, look back to last night's, get caught up on all the latest in the world of professional wrestling, get caught up on last night's Monday Night Raw, look ahead to tonight's NXT, talk about some AEW stuff as well. And then we'll wrap things up with this day in each history. Like I said, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions the best of my ability. With that being said, of course, let's go ahead and get into the articles here. All right. So here we go. Get to this first one here. Comic Book Chaos. Alliance is now suing Diamond over last minute switcheroo. Article by Jameson Ashley, published today. So let's get into what's going on here. So let's see what's going on here. The bankruptcy proceedings of Diamond Comic Distributors, once the largest distributor of comic books in the world, have taken a dramatic turn as Alliance Entertainment, in parentheses AENT, I guess that's their stock their stock name, as it were, stock market name, filed a lawsuit against Diamond and related entities. The suit follows Diamond's controversial decision to sell its assets to the joint backup bidder, Universal Distribution, and Ad Populum, despite AENT being declared the winning bidder at auction with a significantly higher offer. Diamond filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in January, initiating a 13-week process to reorganize its debts under the guidance of financial firm Raymond James. The company auctioned off its assets, which include Diamond Comic Distribution, Alliance Gaming Distribution, Diamond Select Toys, CGA, and Diamond UK. AENT emerged as the top bidder with an offer of $72.25 million. Universal Distribution and Ad Populum submitted a joint backup bid of $69.13 million, but were initially outbid by AENT. However, over the weekend, Diamond shockingly announced its intent to finalize the sale with Universal Ad Populum instead of AENT. The decision came despite AENT later increasing its total bid to $85.37 million after post-auction negotiations, $14.4 million higher than its initial offer, and well above Universal Ad Populum's bid. That that does sound kind of suspicious, doesn't it? Why are they? Of course, I guess the $1 million question here is, or I guess in this case, the $85 million question here is, okay, why would you accept a lower bid from a company? Especially if you already have somebody who's giving you a higher bid. I mean, it doesn't seem to make much sense, does it? Allegations of bad faith and favoritism. And again, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions the best of my ability. But let's see what's going on here further. In its lawsuit, Allied Entertainment accuses Diamond of acting in bad faith throughout the auction process. According to court filings, Alliance Entertainment, or AENT, alleges that Diamond manipulated the auction to favor Universal Ad Populum by allowing them to bid as a group, effectively increasing their financial leverage. The complaint also claims that Diamond made additional economic demands on AENT after the auction that were not part of the original bidding terms, and later ceased communications with AENT altogether. I mean, it almost sounds like they wanted Universal Ad Populum to actually win. So it almost does sound like the possibility maybe they were actually trying to maneuver it in such a way that Universal Ad Populum won. I don't know why. I don't know what kind of deal. That would kind of make you wonder. Well, what kind of deal did Universal Ad Populum strike with Diamond in order for them to be willing to take the lower bid? Could it be maybe maintaining control of the company? Maybe I don't know, but AENT's legal filing describes Diamond's actions as a violation of the court-approved bidding procedures. Quote, this action arises from debtors' inexplicable refusal to seek this court's approval of and to consummate the sale of their assets to the successful bidder at an auction they conducted, unquote. The complaint states AENT is seeking a preliminary injunction with a temporary restraining order to block Diamond from selling its assets to any party other than AENT. Yeah, this just sounds like it just create again. You have to, why would Diamond be putting themselves through this kind of mess? I mean, they already were in trouble with the bankruptcy, but now they want to. Now they're trying to like kind of edge out a lot. ANT right there. That does kind of make you scratch your head, doesn't it? Changing course amid controversy. Diamond justifies its decision by asserting that it had determined after consulting with investment bankers Raymond James. So I guess now we're going to find out why Diamond did all this. So, um, so Diamond justifies its decision by asserting that it had determined after consulting with um, investment bankers Raymond James, unsecured creditors, and other professionals that Universal Ad Populum's backup bid was superior due to changes made after the auction. The exact financial terms of this revised backup bid still remain unclear, as it reportedly relies on formula-based calculations tied to Diamond's financials rather than any fixed dollar amount. So could that mean maybe in financial jargon, maybe, if I understand correctly, when you buy something out of bankruptcy, you're already assuming whatever, whatever, whatever like debts or whatever the company has incurred. So, I would figure that A&T. So, what exactly? You have to almost kind of wonder. Well, what exactly did Universal Ad Populum offer that would make Diamond take their lower bid over what kind of like secondary offers or what have you were made, or concessions were made in order for them to do that. Again, interesting question. I mean, obviously, people who probably know more about bankruptcy law and all that probably can would delve more into this than I as a layman probably could. So, but obviously, Diamond's behavior seems very suspect in all this. But anyway, A&T disputes this claim, arguing that its final offer remains the highest and best bid for Diamond's assets. Yeah, I mean, how can a lower bid be a better offer than a higher bid? That something screwy with the logic there. The company further alleges that Diamond engaged in secret negotiations with Universal Ad Populum after declaring AE&T as the winning bidder, undermining transparency and fairness in the process. Yeah, that does kind of sound like exactly what they did. And again, a head scratcher is how can a lower bid be a winning bidder over a higher bid? It's court battle looms. The legal dispute is set to play out in U.S. bankruptcy court in Maryland before Judge David E. Rice. Witnesses expected to testify include representatives from Raymond James and both bidding parties. Key evidence includes email communications between Diamond's legal counsel and AE&T, auction transcripts, and declarations from key stakeholders. This latest twist has left industry observers stunned. Not surprisingly, there's just something it just looks like there's something screwy going on here. That's pretty obvious. With ANT, ready to close on April 10th, which would be 2 days from now, Thursday, at its higher bid price, and accusing Diamond of prioritizing its preferred buyer over maximizing creditor recovery. The court's decision could have significant implications of how bankruptcy auctions are conducted in the future. Yeah. And again, why was it the preferred buyer? And why would they risk a possible court battle to get the preferred buyer the property? It makes, and again, they're not, and of course, neither Diamond nor Universal Ad Populum, of course, are being too forthcoming with that answer. For now, all eyes were on Judge Rice's courtroom as this high-stakes battle unfolds over one of comics' most storied companies. We'll know more this week as the story unfolds. That definitely does sound like something screwy's going on. When I have a chance, I'm going to probably ask RJ about it because I know he'd probably be a little bit more knowledgeable on this kind of stuff than I would. So, so anyways, there we go with that one. But basically, overall, that whole story sounds kind of screwy. It would leave most people's head scratching a bit there. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the next article here. So this one's from our old buddy Avi Green here. Sold souls at WonderCon. Mark Waid talked comics, chaos, and confusion. Article by our old buddy Avi Green, and posted earlier today. Oh, let's get into this then. All right, so this is Avi speaking, of course. Comic Book Club Live listed 54 questions asked to Mark Waid at this year's WonderCon, and here's what I thought could be pondered. So this is, I guess, this is at least now getting from the article that Avi's referring to here. Has he read every DC comics ever? He's read every Superman comic ever and most Batman comics. Quote, Wonder Woman, yes, unquote. Also Flash, Green Lantern, quote, have I read any good fiction books in the past 20 years? No, unquote. Oh, ouch. So now back to Avi here. Interesting he should say that, because if we cite DC Marvel as the example, they collapsed artistically within the last 2 decades or so. And there were some comics and series that fell down even earlier. The list could even include Wade's own writings since that time, because his Daredevil run was pretentious. And now back to the article he's referring to. Characters sold their soul in Underworld Unleashed. Will they ever get it back? Not my responsibility. So there we go. So back to Avi here. Perhaps it is. The biggest victim of Underworld Unleashed had to have been Blue Devil, who was depicted asking to be changed to a real devil or anthropomorph, rather than ask if he could regain his human form. And his assistant, Marla Bloom, was killed in the crossover, and today has been practically obliterated from memory. I think that if Wade wanted, he could demand all those embarrassments from UU be reversed, and maybe someday he will. For now, his answer was certainly disappointing. Back to the article here. The big chunk of kryptonite being introduced in Superman Unlimited, quote, that's a question for Dan Slott, unquote. So I guess what he's going over here are, I guess, questions or things that were said to him, looking for his response. And then Avi responding to what we just read there. And if Wade's got no complaints about Slott's bad writing, that's very disappointing. And I guess here's the next question posed to Wade. Let's see. Favorite issue of 52. The issue where they introduced blood kryptonite, though only so the question was the favorite issue of 52, and I guess Wade's response was the issue where they introduced blood kryptonite, though only because that's the first one he could remember. He never reversed anything bad that took place in Identity Crisis when he wrote the 52 Weekly, so I think the citation of that comic is tasteless. That's Avi speaking. Now back to the article. The next question asked of Wade, thoughts and feelings on Bart Allen. Let's see. Wade's response, what? I created Bart Allen, quote unquote. He has the original design sketch for the character on his wall. And then Avi's response to that, I wonder how he feels about the mess and the joke Jeff Jones turned Impulse into over 2 decades ago when he wrote a new volume of Teen Titans, something Bart Allen's never recovered from since. Now back to the article that Avi's referencing here. And of course, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, top 3 books that have made you cry. Those are the. That's a question to Wade. Wade's response: Death of Jean Grey, Superman number 148, which he read as an adult, is called quote, Superman owes $1 billion, unquote, where an IRS agent realizes Superman owes $1 billion in back taxes. And I think I may have even read that. I myself may have read that one before, I think, or at least read the synopsis, because that story sounds familiar. And the third one was the Superman novel titled Miracle Monday. And here's Avi's response to that answer. But does he find it sad Jim Shooter even allowed Jean to be changed into a monster, or that Stan Lee did nothing to prevent it himself? Sure, it was reversed a few years later, around 1985, but even so, I myself find it appalling they wouldn't create a new character to serve the role in the late 70s. That kind of conduct served as a precursor to some of the more woke directions seen since the mid-2000s. Back to the reference article here. Hey, Fitzshozo. Hi, everybody. It doesn't appear I can record video games anymore. Oh, what, you trying? You were trying to record video game? You mean for your channel there? You mean? Fitzshozo. And again, if you haven't already, if you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. Yes. Well, what's stopping you? Is it YouTube that's stopping you, or is it something to do with your equipment? Well, anyway, I'll get back to the article here and wait for you to. Oh, my computer. Ah, well, that kind of sucks. All right. Well, anyways, as we now continue on with the article here, let's see. So now back to the reference article that Avi's doing here. The biggest continuity twist to deal with a new history of the DC universe. So that's a question posed to Mark Waid. Waid responds to that question. He notes that the previous history had 100 pages in 1986. He had 120 pages for 80 years. I'm doing my best, quote unquote, says Waid. Quote, the hardest one to wrangle besides Hawkman, nobody understands Hawkman, unquote, is Wonder Girl. He also notes it's the current DC universe, not any of the pre-crisis continuities, which helps a little bit. Well, yeah, trying to really trying to make something out of the multiverse and the pre-crisis universe, it would be kind of hectic. And then here's Avi's response to that. Well, if he realizes even Jeff Johns and James Robinson didn't know what to do with Hawkman, at least that's getting somewhere. But as I mentioned before, it was at the dawn of the 90s when the Silver Age Hawkman was turned into a shambles. Then back to the reference article here. Favorite memory of the DC implosion in 19... wait. Favorite memory of the DC implosion. Now, for those of you who don't know what the DC implosion was, apparently what that was is when they decided to kind of... at a time, I guess, during the Silver Age when they had so many features and characters, it was just too much and had a lot that weren't selling. So what they did, they kind of just kind of imploded. Basically, they basically just shrank down a bunch of stuff. They got rid of a bunch of like minor characters and minor features. It just basically imploded, as it were. And so this is Wade's response. In 1978, DC was doing a big expansion of the line with more books, which cost more money. None of the books were on the stands, but his neighbor's cousin filled him in on what happened. That DC had to actually cut back because of a lack of faith from Warner Brothers. Quote unquote, that sucked. All right. So now this is Avi's response to Wade's response, as it were. G, that could also describe recent times, where they obviously don't have faith in something. They only continue to own for the movie prospects, for all the good it's been doing lately, of course. And then back to the reference article. How involved are you in the new Superman movie? And then Wade's response, he's not involved, but, quote, everything I've heard gives me confidence, unquote. And then Avi's response to that, except James Gunn, in my opinion, and there are signs wokeness affects this new screenplay too. And back to the reference article. Do you ever get bothered when someone doesn't follow your canon? And then Wade responds, yes, but, quote, it's just the rules of the game. You have to live with it, unquote. Then Avi's response to that. Whether or not his canonizations are followed, it's nothing compared to when characterization is corrupted as horrifically as it's been since the mid-2000s. Back to the article, back to the reference article. What's the most important thing about a comic book script? Wade's response, quote, they have emotion, they have heart, they have human moments because that's all people care about, unquote. He notes that early on, he made the mistake that plot was the most important part, when it's actually the emotion. I wonder how Avi's going to respond to that. Here we go with that, with Avi's response to that statement. Unfortunately, even emotion can be twisted into something implausible and phony. And that was definitely the case with Identity Crisis in 2004, a miniseries that seemed to appeal to people who hated superheroes and the themes of heroism they're built upon. But it's also true that at the same time, the main problem with said miniseries is that it was plot driven, not character driven, and the minimization of serious issues like sexual violence was the most utterly offensive part of the whole show. Now, if I remember correctly, I think Identity Crisis, if I remember correctly, that was a story where at one point you had where Dr. Light had discovered the heroes' identities, and then a group of them tried to have or had Zatanna try to erase his memories. Batman objected to that. It also led to, I guess, I believe it also led to, if I remember correctly, led to Dr. Light ARPing the Adams wife, Jean Loring, I believe, or something like that. And Jean Loring went crazy. It just kind of was a whole big mess, from what I understand. Back to the article. Before that, let me see. Hello, let's see. Who is this? Mikey. Oh, thank you there. Let's see. Mikey Suzo4. Hello, Mike. Hope you're having a good week. Well, yeah, I'm doing my best to do so. Thank you for popping in. If you haven't already, if you can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here we talk about grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I will try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, getting back to the article here. So going back to the reference article here, you ever miss working in comics journalism? And then Mark Wade's response, quote, I really don't. I enjoyed it at the time, unquote. It helped him network with comics people and the other thing that helped him was he was the gopher at conventions. So now going back to Avi's response to Wade's response here. I had no idea until he ever worked in journalism until now. All right, a little bit of a screwy way to put that, but it's decidedly enough to wonder if he ever had an issue with how J. Jonah Jameson was meant to serve as a metaphor for news writers who can do bad things. I've never understood how journalists who take bad positions, political or otherwise, never seem to have a problem with what Jameson represents in the Marvel Universe. Yet they continue to read Spider-Man and other Marvel books he could appear in anyway. Most bewildering, if you ask me. Back to the reference article that Avi's referencing. Here. Favorite person he picked up at the airport. the interviewers are asking Mark Waid. Mark Waid's response: Dave Sim, one day after he divorced his wife, which, quote, he wanted to talk about a lot, unquote. Oh boy. Oh boy. I mean, okay. I think there, honestly, after reading that response, I wonder if there's maybe something a little screwy in Mark Waid's head. So he gets some kind of joy listening to a guy talk about his recent divorce. Dude's got some, sounds like dude's got some issues. Sounds like dude's got some issues there. I have to kind of wonder about that. All right. Back to Avi. Back to Avi's response to what Mark Waid just said. Is that the Canadian cartoonist who drew Cerebus and had a record of behavior considered offensive to women? Whatever. If that's the case, no wonder. Oh boy, you really have to, wow, scratch your head, man. Whatever anybody saw in Sim, I'll never know. But here we are years later, and only in the time after Cerebus finally ended did anybody on the left have the audacity to distance themselves from such a pretentious artist. Yet Waid still speaks favorably of him. Well, that's sad. Back to the article. Favorite JSA character? Original, and then Wade's response: original Mr. Terrific, Terry Sloan. Let's see. Avi's response to Wade's answer there. Audie should bring up Terry Sloan in that sense, because I think the original Mr. Terrific only appeared once or twice in the Golden Age Justice Society tales. Same with Wildcat. IIRC, whatever that means. Even if he did appear with them again in the Silver Age another time or two. Yeah. Yeah. Now that I think about it, looking back on some, I think Avi makes a point there. But even though Mr. Terrific and Wildcat only made a couple of appearances during the Golden Age, if that is really the case, they still were featured quite a bit in their own features. In fact, they were actually both a part of Sensation Comics with Wonder Woman. I think Wildcat was the backup feature, and then Mr. Terrific was the third feature, so the tertiary feature. So now back to the reference article. When they asked Mark Waid, what does the Fantastic Four movie has to nail to get it right? And then Waid responds in quotes here, they have to find a balance between adventure and comedy. They need to do something truly imaginative that you have never seen before, unquote. Matt Fraction told him, quote, you're going to love this, unquote. And Avi's response to that answer, when he cites left-wing ideologues like those, that says all you need to know something's wrong. And besides, when an ideologue like Pedro Pascal is cast as Mr. Fantastic, that's another indication something already has gone wrong. It's a shame, obviously, but points to a sad situation where the Fantastic Four of all Marvel creations has possibly been the most mishandled ever since being adapted to live action. Back to the reference article. Favorite Superman villain and why? And then Mark Wade's response, Lex Luthor. Quote, I like the idea that Lex and Superman were friends as kids, unquote, because, quote, a core element of Superman is his loneliness, unquote. Now, mind you, just to remind everybody, the idea of Superboy and Lex being friends when they were younger, obviously, that was a concept that was introduced during the Silver Age. Originally, they were never friends in at least on Earth too. So we understand. Of course, I know they're talking about Silver Age and beyond, and of course they probably also brought that up. Oh, so here we go. We have some more exchanges here. J. Jonah Jameson, aka JJ, by Peter Parker sometimes, is a total conundrum. On one hand, he endorses Spider-Man defeating criminals who could kill business for his newspaper, while on the other hand, part one of two, he's asking for Spider-Man's total arrest and expulsion from his city. Odd. I don't know if that's I don't know if that's, I guess, a current situation, because traditionally he was actually, at least as far as I know, because from as I remember watching the cartoons as a kid, when they were, when I was a kid and they were showing, of course, the 1967 Spider-Man, and of course I grew up in the 80s, so I also saw Spider-Man and then Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, 1980s cartoons. JJ was never liked Spider-Man. He and then they revealed, I think, in the 90s cartoon, where his hatred for Spider-Man wasn't just for Spider-Man, but was for all people. Now that might be, again, something more of a modern aspect to it, but all men in Mask, because the Masked Man ended up killing his wife and son. So, but J. Jonah Jameson was just not big on vigilantes altogether. So, my favorite Superman villain might be Brainiac or Parasite. And then that was Jozo. And then Mikey says here, my favorite Superman villain, toss up between Lex Luthor and Darkseid. Yeah. But anyways, back to the article here. So, all right. So this is Avi's response to Wade's reply. Let me get this straight. Superman is that much of a loner, as though it weren't questionable enough already. Wade's talking about villains as favorites. We're told that a guy who was written as having relations with girls like Lana Lane, as much as Lois Lane, and even Lori Lamaris, makes a great citation, is quote unquote lonely. Yeah. That does kind of I get Avi's point there. That is kind of an interesting logic there. Wasn't the character Pete Ross also written in the past as a buddy of Clark Kent's in the Silver Age? And unlike Peter Parker's relations with Jameson and Spidey, Clark was usually on good terms with Perry White and Superman. Mm-hmm. And even in a way, Jimmy Olsen was another one of Superman's pal. In fact, he was Superman's pal, as it were. There's more questions that could have been asked of Wade, like whether he believes Marvel should restore the Spider marriage, and DC should fully reverse any bad direction taken since Dan Didio got his foot in the door, and even earlier than that. But apparently that wasn't the case at WonderCon. Though it's hardly a surprise, obviously, there's only so many would-be specialists who regrettably won't show the courage to ask challenging questions for real. All right, so there we go with that one. So we're now, of course, we're now done with the articles for the evening, as it were. So with that, let's see now. Let's see now. Do you like the Toyman, Mikey? Let's see. I'm okay with the Toyman. Yeah, Fizz. Well, the Toyman's gone through some interesting changes over the years as well. So, well, anyways, with that now we're already up to the 46-minute mark here. So we'll move on to the we'll of course move on to the wrestling wrap up. We look back to last night's Monday Night Raw and ahead to tonight's NXT. But before we do that, I do want to talk a little bit about AEW, as AEW is still getting some criticism over their booking decision, particularly with the world title, as even Matt Hardy came out today and was commenting on how AEW needs to change direction here in terms of its world title picture. They needed to pull the trigger and have Swerve Strickland, but apparently Tony Khan is just pretty much just set on waiting until Darby Allin gets back before putting the world title on Darby Allin. So they're going to keep the title, and apparently they kept the trios titles on the other Death Riders as well, having but with some of their main event booking, even some of the more hardcore AEW fans are crying foul. People are really tired of the way Tony Khan is apparently booking AEW right now. Actually, if anything, from what after hearing some of the comments people are making about it too, it's actually kind of reminding me of some of the issues people have had with like the NWO angle, after a while, as well as even how kind of the whole during TNA back in the late aughts with the whole Fortune versus New Blood angles. Where you got these older wrestlers trying to hold on for dear life to their spots and just keeping the younger guys down, Let's see. And Mikey, I see you let me see Mike, do you agree that White's MMA sports a lot more popular nowadays than ECW, WWE, WWF, etc.? I think so. You're more or less asking me is mixed martial arts more popular than pro wrestling? That's, I think, the gist of what you're asking me. I would say they're probably about the same popularity wise. I would say that maybe because it is more real, I think MMA might be slightly more popular than pro wrestling. But pro wrestling, the WWF is still pretty popular. And the thing is that one of the things, particularly over in Japan, in particular with the Japanese pro wrestling, right? Because ECW no longer exists. All right. So if you're asking me, okay, is MMA more popular than pro wrestling? I'd say at this point they might have a slight advantage. It's not as big as some people might think, because pro wrestling is still pretty popular. It's also still pretty popular. Um, and the thing about it, particularly over in Japan, the way Japanese pro wrestling is, it is more closer to MMA because of the martial arts influence. You know, watch a Japanese promotion, watch like a New Japan show or a New Japan match, watch a Stardom match, watch like Mary Gold, or those are women, female, but watch some of these Japanese promotions, and you might find some interesting stuff there. Let's see. Yes, mixed martial arts are more popular because it's legit. Pro wrestling is only popular for storylines. Um, yeah, I mean, again, the sports entertainment aspect, because today's fans don't have an under. I mean, and I would have to agree with you there, that shows though, because of the fact, you know, a lot of today's fans don't really understand pro wrestling, because like I have an account on Cage Match. Cage Match has a listing of results, and then you can also rate the matches and stuff, for cards. Um, and I read a lot where people sit there and say they'll give some matches are very technically sound and very good, in terms of the in-ring work, they're very good, but people will like knock them because, oh, it's not moving the story along, or this. And what people don't understand in terms of professional wrestling is, they don't understand the concept of what an enhancement show or an enhancement match is all about. So I get what you're saying there, Shozo, with about how the mixed martial how the why the mixed martial arts is more popular. But even I said that it's slightly more popular. Sumo wrestling is an entirely different sport altogether. Definitely fits. Well, yeah, but we're not, when we're talking pro wrestling, we're not including sumo wrestling in Japan is. But what I'm talking about, I'm talking about the Japanese pro. I'm not talking about sumo wrestling when I'm talking about Japanese pro wrestling. I'm actually talking about professional wrestling promotions in Japan that are like the WWE and AEW over here. I'm talking about like New Japan Pro Wrestling, All Japan Pro Wrestling, Pro Wrestling Noah, you know, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, and then some of the women's promotions like Stardom, Dream Fight, Stardom, Marigold, Diana, Pro Wrestling Wave. So those are actual pro wrestling promotions where they do incorporate mixed martial arts. I'm not talking about sumo. You're right. Sumo wrestling is completely different, and that's not necessarily what I'm talking about when I say when we're talking pro wrestling in Japan. I'm talking about Japanese professional wrestling promotions. I appreciate that local wrestling for schools and colleges is more coordinated and safe. Well, yeah. I mean, amateur wrestling is still amateur wrestling, Olympic style wrestling, freestyle wrestling. Those still are legitimate sports. Whereas professional wrestling, it is quote unquote sports entertainment. I mean, yes, there's an athletic element. People can get hurt, but but it is more choreographed than anything else. But anyways, back to talking about what happened on last night's Raw. The show did open up with a contract signing, as after weeks, after weeks since Rhea Ripley had lost the women's world title to Io Sky, she'd been trying to get back into the match, and now after last week's match and how it ended, Adam Pearce finally decided to make it a three-way match. So coming up at WrestleMania, Io Sky will be defending the WWE Women's World Title against both Bianca Belair and Rhea Ripley. And as I mentioned yesterday, Kevin Owens is now out of WrestleMania. Initially, they were going to have Kevin Owens taking on Randy Orton in a one-on-one match, only for that match to be canceled because Kevin Owens has some legit neck issues that he has to tend to. He actually has to have surgery, from what they're saying. I've met some female pro wrestlers before and even have a few autographs. They're generally very sweet ladies and good charitable people. Well, that's cool, Mikey. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you've had some good experiences there. Anyways, so now with all that being said, and they also did announce this past Friday, the first women's singles match, first women's non-title singles match in WrestleMania history will be occurring at this year's WrestleMania. Jade Cargill will be taking on Naomi. So, but with that, let's also go over what all happened on last night. So the opening match saw Lyra Valkyria retain the women's Intercontinental title over Bayley. Setting up possible them teaming up together. There's some speculation they may team up together to challenge Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez for the women's tag team title. In a 6-man tag match, American-made of the Creed brothers, Brutus and Julius Creed, teamed with El Grande Americano to defeat the LWO members of Cruz del Toro, Dragon Lee, and Joaquin Wilde. El Grande Americano put a metal plate in his mask to help get the win, knocking out Dragon Lee in their match. In a match for the WWE World Tag Team titles, the War Raiders retained on a DQ loss as Kofi. I think it was Kofi Kingston who introduced a chair into the match. But while on the other side, Xavier Woods had the ref distracted. I believe it was Ivar who got the chair away from him. But by the time the ref turned around, he saw that Ivar used the chair on Kingston for him to get DQ'd. And the main event saw Penta defeating Dominic Mysterio in a one-on-one match. Said, basically with the announcement coming that Braun Breaker will be defending the WWE Intercontinental title at WrestleMania in a 4-way match against Penta and Judgment Day members Dominic Mysterio and Finn Balor. So that's all from last night. So now let's look ahead to what's going to go down on tonight's. Let's see what's going to go down on tonight's NXT. on tonight's NXT, coming up from the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, which will be on the CW. In a women's North American qualifying match in a tournament to crown the new NXT Women's North American title after Stephanie Vaquer vacated the title last week. So Roka will be taking on a mystery opponent. In a singles match, Wes Lee takes on Yoshiki Inamura. In a non-title tag team match, NXT Tag Team Champions Axiom and Nathan Frazer take on Swipe Right of Brad Brailer and Ricky Smokes. In a six-man tag match, NXT champion Oba Femi teams with former NXT champion Trick Williams and Javon Evans, his two opponents coming up at the next NXT pay-per-view, to take on the faction known as Dark State of Cutter James, Dion Lennox, Osiris, and Saquon Sugar. So that's more like a 7-man tag match. And then the main event, we'll see Jordan Grace take on Jada Park, and I believe this is going to determine who will get to next challenge Stephanie Vaquer for the NXT Women's Championship. So that's all I got for you. Let's see. All right, so I subbed you, Fitz. Cool channel, sir. Thank you, Mikey. I hit your like and shared my. Thank you. It's always a pleasure, sir. And take care. Thank you there, Mikey. You're welcome, Fizz. All right. I'm glad somebody came in to say hi and stuff. So, anyways, with all that being said, of course, we're just past the hour mark. So we're finished with the wrestling wrap up. And of course, tomorrow with the wrestling wrap up, we'll take a look at what happened on tonight's NXT, find out who Soruka faced, see who would advance in the. Oh, we're not leaving just yet. It's Jozo. We still got this day in each history to go over. And we'll also talk about what's going to go down on Dynamite tomorrow. But anyways, before we get to that, of course, like I said, we do have one more thing to do, which is with today being Tuesday, April the 8th, 2025. Let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So, as I look here, 65 here. All right. So, first off, we're going to head back to 1955, 70 years ago today. 70 years ago today, on this date, 70 years ago today. The NWA's upstate territory had an event at the Buffalo Memorial Auditorium in Buffalo, New York, with well over 2,000 people in attendance. Opening match saw Johnny Gordon defeat George City by countout. Bill McMurray and Lou Petosha in a time limit draw. Let's see. Don Lewin defeated Chuck Molnar in 15 minutes 30 seconds. Bob Liebler and Lee Henning went to a 30-minute time limit draw, and the best 2 out of 3 falls tag team match. Ivan and Carol Kalmikoff defeated Bearcat Wright and Prince Maiva Maiva, and 2 falls to 1. So there we go with that. Now, of course, to switch over to the next piece of niche history is on this date 60 years ago today, in 1965. So let me pull that up here. On this date 60 years ago today, the 35th issue of Richie Rich from Harvey Comics went on sale on this date back in 1965, 60 years ago today. It sold for 12 cents for 32 pages. On this date 60 years ago today, 35th issue of Richie Rich from Harvey Comics went on sale on this date back in 1965. And moving ahead, and 1965 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice. As also on this date back in 1965, the Japanese anime PP the Spaceman or Alien Fi-Fi or Fi-Fi the Alien, whichever title you want to choose, premiered on NHK on this date back in 1965. It was a science fiction television drama, but on this date back in 1965, the anime PP the Spaceman or Fi-Fi the Alien or Alien Fi-Fi or Fifi premiered on NHK on this date back in 1965, 60 years ago. And finally, moving ahead to 1975, on this date in 1975, at the 47th Academy Awards, at the 47th Academy Awards, Will Vinton and Bob Gardner's Closed Mondays won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film back in 1975. It was an 8-minute claymation film created by, of course, Bob Gardner and filmed by Will Vinton in 1974. It was produced by Lighthouse Productions, released by Pyramid Films in the United States. It won the Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film for 1975. All right, so with that being said, I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. And we'll be back here with more niche news tomorrow. Of course, this Sunday, I'll have Apex from Apex Comics with me, as we'll be looking back at comics that went on sale in May of 1940. We'll be looking at books that went on sale from Columbia, Big Shot Comics, Volume 1, Issue 3. So with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.